I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it.
The music was still playing when Prince William raised his hand and brought the entire palace reception to a halt. Conversations died. Glasses stopped midway to waiting lips. At the center of the stunned room stood Princess Charlotte, fighting tears after a cutting remark from Meghan struck far deeper than anyone expected. What began as an evening designed to display royal unity suddenly became the scene of a father's fury and a fracture no polished palace statement could conceal. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William had entered Buckingham Palace expecting tension, but not humiliation. The reception had been arranged to welcome charity leaders, Commonwealth guests, and relatives, while proving that years of division could still be contained. A palace reception is a royal gathering uniting guests around the crown, and that purpose made the collapse more damaging. Catherine stayed close to Charlotte, sensing how carefully the child was reading every face. Meghan understood the pressure surrounding her invitation. She had been allowed back into this family setting as a limited gesture of reconciliation, and every word near the Prince and Princess of Wales carried weight. Then she turned toward Charlotte and said the young princess was already learning how to stand behind the boys, meaning George and Louis. The sentence landed. Charlotte lowered her eyes, tried to hold herself together, and failed. Catherine moved first. She wrapped one arm around her daughter and felt the child trembling. The princess knew the remark had struck at a fear Charlotte rarely voiced, that her value might shrink as her brother's roles grew. William saw the tears, crossed the room without waiting for an aide, and asked Meghan to repeat what she had said. His voice remained controlled. His anger did not. Silence became the answer. Meghan offered no apology, and the future king raised his hand again. He ordered the music stopped, declared the reception over, and refused to let ceremony continue, while his daughter stood wounded. A senior courtier closed the doors while palace officials decided what had become an official crisis. Charles remained seated for several seconds. When the king finally rose, he looked not at Charlotte, but directly at Meghan. The monarch's stare carried a suspicion. The remark may have been chosen, not careless. William led his daughter away. Behind them, Meghan whispered to Harry that everything had been misunderstood. Harry did not answer. His face showed he had heard more than she realized. The reception had ended, but Charlotte's pain had opened a conflict involving two parents, one wounded child, and years of buried resentment. Behind the closed doors of a private palace room, Charlotte finally stopped pretending she was all right. The young princess asked Catherine a question no mother expected to hear that evening. Did the family believe she mattered less because George would one day become king? Outside, William paced the corridor, anger giving way to guilt. Meghan's words had lasted only seconds, yet they had reached into the most vulnerable part of a child raised beneath the shadow of succession. Catherine held her daughter's hand and chose every word carefully. Charlotte had always understood that George carried a constitutional future, meaning he was expected to inherit the crown and one day serve as monarch. William and the princess had spent years teaching all three children that different duties never meant different levels of love. Yet one remark had weakened that protection in seconds. Charlotte wiped her face and asked whether she would always be expected to move aside. Catherine answered firmly. Duty could shape where someone stood during a ceremony, but it could never measure that person's worth. The princess told her daughter that George's future did not erase her own, and no royal rule could make her voice less important inside their family. William remained outside with George, who had quietly followed his sister from the reception. The boy looked shaken and blamed himself, believing his position had caused Charlotte's pain. The prince crouched beside his son and made one thing clear. George had done nothing wrong. Still, guilt stayed on the child's face, and William felt his anger deepen. Harry found Meghan in a side corridor and demanded to know why she had chosen those exact words. She insisted she had been criticizing the institution, not Charlotte. Royal hierarchy meant the order of rank and importance inside the monarchy, and Meghan argued that she wanted the child to understand its unfairness. Harry rejected the explanation. Whatever the intention, Charlotte had been the one forced to carry the wound. Sophie entered the private room and spoke quietly to Catherine. The trusted confidant revealed through her own direct account that she had watched Meghan studying Charlotte and George for several minutes before approaching them. Sophie no longer believed the remark had been spontaneous. Catherine heard the warning and pulled her daughter closer. Charles arrived moments later and found Charlotte still gripping her mother's hand. The king did not offer a formal speech. He knelt beside his granddaughter and admitted that royal rank had hurt people in their family before. The monarch promised that she would never be asked to accept cruelty simply because it came wrapped in tradition. Charlotte hesitated, then looked directly at him. Meghan had said something else earlier that evening. What appeared to be one cruel sentence was beginning to look like the final strike in a conversation that had started long before William crossed the room. The crisis had not begun beneath the chandeliers of the reception hall. Its true origin lay 3 weeks earlier, in a quiet garden at Windsor, where Meghan and Charlotte found themselves briefly alone after a family luncheon. No cameras were present. No aides stood close enough to intervene. What Meghan said during those private minutes remained hidden until the child finally repeated it to Charles, and the revelation explained why one sentence at the reception had broken her composure so completely. William had agreed to attend the Windsor luncheon only after Charles gave him a direct promise. The children would not be pulled into adult arguments, old grievances, or public battles. A private family luncheon was meant to be an informal gathering away from official ceremony, and the king believed it could soften tensions before the larger palace reception. Catherine remained cautious, but she trusted the monarch's assurance. Charlotte stepped outside after the meal while Catherine spoke with Sophie indoors. The trusted confidant had noticed the child seemed restless, yet she allowed her a few quiet minutes. Meghan followed soon after, presenting the encounter as a gentle conversation about school, confidence, and future royal duties. At first, Charlotte believed she was being offered advice. Meghan then changed the subject. She told the young princess that girls inside the monarchy were often celebrated only until the male heir became old enough to lead. A male heir is the boy expected to inherit the throne, and in Charlotte's family that role belonged to George. Meghan leaned closer and added that she should prepare for the day when everyone stops asking what you think. Charlotte carried those words alone. She did not tell William or Catherine because she feared the confession would destroy Charles's attempt at reconciliation. The child began wondering whether every comforting promise from her parents was only protection from a truth they did not want her to face. Sophie later remembered seeing Meghan return from the garden without Charlotte. Through her direct account to Catherine, she explained that the girl remained near the fountain, unusually silent. The trusted confidant had assumed Charlotte felt overwhelmed by the luncheon. Now she understood that something far more damaging had happened. Charles heard the full account and gripped the arms of his chair. The king realized his promise had already been broken before the reception began. When Meghan later spoke about Charlotte standing behind the boys, the words echoed the garden warning almost exactly. That repetition convinced the child it had all been deliberate. William learned the truth from Catherine and stopped speaking. Then the prince turned toward the closed corridor door. The next exchange would not pass through aides or polished statements. He intended to face Meghan directly and demand the truth. William entered the smaller drawing room without an aide, a secretary, or a prepared statement. Meghan was waiting beside Harry, while Charles stood near the fireplace and Catherine remained with Charlotte elsewhere. The prince did not raise his voice. He placed both hands on the back of an empty chair and asked one question. Why had an adult used a child to make a point about the monarchy? Meghan's answer would determine whether the family could remain in the same room. Charles ordered the adjoining corridor cleared before the door closed. The king wanted no staff, no witnesses, and no carefully managed interruption. A drawing room is a private palace space, used for small meetings rather than formal ceremonies, and that privacy stripped away every layer of protection. Only William, Meghan, Harry, and the monarch remained. William repeated both remarks exactly. First came the warning in the Windsor garden. Then came the comment about Charlotte learning to stand behind the boys. The prince made it clear that this was no longer a misunderstanding. Two similar statements, delivered weeks apart, looked like a pattern aimed directly at his daughter. Meghan held her ground. She argued that she had wanted Charlotte to understand how royal systems could push women aside. The monarchy, she said, had spent generations ranking people before hearing them. William answered without hesitation. No lesson about inequality gave an adult the right to frighten a child about her place inside her own family. Harry moved between them when the prince stepped closer. He defended his wife's intention, but his voice changed when Charlotte's name returned to the argument. Meghan should never have involved her, he admitted. The words stunned Meghan because Harry had refused to defend her without limits. William pulled the empty chair away from the table and pushed it against the wall. The gesture carried the force of a verdict. Charlotte would never again be used as a symbol in someone else's war, he declared, and Meghan would not return to the reception that night. Charles then asked the question no one wanted to hear. Had Meghan planned to discuss succession during the event? Succession means the legal order deciding who inherits the throne, and any private discussion involving the children carried enormous weight. Meghan hesitated, only for a second. But everyone noticed. Meghan finally admitted she had received a private briefing suggesting Charlotte's future ceremonial role might shrink as George grew older. William demanded the name of the person who gave it to her. She refused. The family conflict had exposed something darker. Meghan's words had caused the wound, but someone inside the palace had placed those words in her hands. By midnight, the reception room was empty, but one light remained burning inside the king's private office. Charles sat before a short list of staff members who had access to plans concerning the younger royals. William stood opposite him, unwilling to leave until the source was identified. The crisis was no longer simply about Meghan's cruelty or Charlotte's tears. Someone had taken a private discussion about the child's future and turned it into ammunition capable of splitting the family in public. Charles removed his glasses and studied the names again. The briefing Meghan had described was only preliminary ceremonial planning, meaning an early discussion about how public duties might change before any final decision was made. It did not reduce Charlotte's status. It simply considered how George's growing role would require more attention as he moved closer to adulthood. William knew how dangerous that difference was. A private schedule can look harmless inside an office, but once stripped of context, it can become a weapon. Only a small group had seen the material. Charles, the prince, Catherine, 2 senior secretaries, and a deputy advisor responsible for arranging family appearances. Someone among them had allowed private planning to become public pain. Charles felt the betrayal personally. The king had promised that the children would be protected, yet the leak had come from an office working under his own authority. William accused the palace of treating George, Charlotte, and Louis like pieces on a constitutional board. The institution, he said, always counted the damage after the wound had already been made. Charles defended his staff at first. He argued that years of service could not be erased by suspicion alone. Then William placed Charlotte's abandoned bracelet on the desk. The small object ended the argument. The monarch stared at it and understood that administrative carelessness had followed his granddaughter into the reception room. Security records delivered the first hard answer. A documented palace access log showed that the deputy advisor had met privately with a member of Meghan's communications circle 2 days before the Windsor luncheon. The meeting had never appeared on the official schedule, and no explanation had been filed afterward. The advisor was called in and questioned directly. He admitted sharing fragments of the ceremonial plan, claiming he wanted Meghan to support Charlotte publicly and calm concerns about the girl's future. Instead, those fragments had been reshaped into a warning that the child would be pushed aside. William demanded immediate removal. Charles did not agree at once. The hesitation changed everything. The king knew the advisor possessed records of other private exchanges, leaked schedules, and manipulated encounters stretching far beyond Charlotte. Removing one courtier might protect her, but it could also expose how long royal tensions had been deliberately shaped and used against the family. Before sunrise, 3 decisions had been made. The deputy advisor was suspended, Meghan's remaining palace access was withdrawn, and every future engagement involving William's children would require direct approval from both parents. Yet official action could not erase what had happened. As staff removed Meghan's name from the next morning's family schedule, Harry sat alone in a guest room, staring at a packed case and realizing that the evening had ended more than a reception. Charles authorized a full review before anyone could soften the consequences. The inquiry would examine private meetings, unauthorized disclosures, and every communication involving George, Charlotte, and Louis. A palace access order is an internal decision controlling who may enter royal residences and attend official family events, and Meghan's withdrawal meant the door had closed immediately. William went further. He insisted that no future appearance involving his children would pass through general household channels, the staff system that usually coordinates royal schedules and public duties. Catherine supported him without hesitation. The princess believed those channels had allowed adult rivalries to move far too close to Charlotte, and she would not permit it again. Harry carried the decision to Meghan himself. She sat down slowly, removed one earring, and asked whether he truly believed she had intended to make Charlotte cry. He did not answer at once. Then he told her that intention no longer mattered as much as consequence. Meghan tried to return to the argument about inequality, but Harry stopped her. Charlotte had heard an adult confirm her deepest fear. No criticism of the institution could erase that wound, and no explanation could make the child responsible for understanding it. William faced a different pain. He sat with Charlotte and apologized for not seeing what she had carried since Windsor. The prince expected anger. Instead, his daughter admitted she had stayed silent because she wanted Charles's family gathering to succeed. She had tried to protect the adults from conflict, even while the conflict was hurting her. Catherine then received a documented security summary showing that the suspended advisor had altered seating recommendations before both gatherings. Meghan had repeatedly been placed near Charlotte. The pattern was not chance. The princess understood that the encounters had been quietly arranged. Charles signed a new order, requiring every message involving the younger royals to be reviewed. The king then refused the advisor's request for one final private meeting. Trust had collapsed, and the monarch would not reopen the door. Harry prepared to leave with Meghan. Before he could go, Charlotte asked to speak with her uncle alone. The next decision would not come from the king, the heir, or any palace committee, but from the child, whose tears had forced the monarchy to stop. Charlotte met Harry in a small sitting room with no aides, no cameras, and no adults speaking on her behalf. William waited outside while Catherine remained at the far end of the corridor. The young princess was still shaken, but she had asked for the conversation herself. Harry expected anger. Instead, his niece looked directly at him and said she needed him to understand why silence had hurt almost as much as Meghan's words. Harry entered alone because Charlotte had requested it. He sat across from her rather than beside her, giving the young princess control over the distance between them. She had always seen her uncle as the relative most willing to challenge royal expectations. That history made the wound harder to understand. Meghan had spoken as though she were protecting Charlotte, yet the child had been left feeling smaller. Charlotte chose her words carefully. Meghan had spoken as if her future were already fading, she said, and as if George's growing role would slowly erase her own. The crown is the institution built around the monarch and the order of succession, but to Charlotte, it was still her family. She did not want protection that began by teaching her no one would listen. Harry lowered his eyes. He admitted that he had remained quiet during earlier conversations because he feared another confrontation with William. The confession came directly, with no age shaping it and no written statement to soften it. By avoiding conflict between adults, he now understood. He had allowed a child to carry the tension alone. Charlotte did not ask him to choose between Meghan and the rest of the family. She asked for something simpler and stronger. Neither she nor her brothers should ever again be used as examples in arguments about the monarchy. Their names, fears, and futures were not weapons. Harry then revealed what he had hidden. Before the reception, he had warned Meghan not to discuss succession with the children. Succession means the legal order deciding who inherits the throne, and he knew the subject could easily frighten them. His admission confirmed that the danger had been understood before the boundary was crossed. Harry left the room and faced William without excuses. He repeated Charlotte's words and admitted his own silence had failed her. The brothers did not reconcile. Too much remained between them. But the prince gave one brief nod, acknowledging the honesty. Harry returned to Meghan with a final decision. They would leave immediately. Before they did, she would write Charlotte an apology containing no politics, no explanation, and no blame. Charlotte had found her voice in private. Now its consequences were about to reach far beyond the palace walls. By morning, the palace had issued only one sentence, confirming that the reception ended early due to a private family matter. It was not enough. Guests had seen the music stop, Charlotte leave in tears, and Meghan disappear from the remaining schedule. Then one photograph reached the front pages. William walking through the palace courtyard with his daughter's hand held tightly in his own. That single image transformed private pain into a national debate about childhood, duty, and royal protection. The palace refused to name Meghan or repeat the remark, hoping silence would protect Charlotte from another wave of attention. A palace statement is an official message released on behalf of the royal household, but this one revealed almost nothing. That restraint had the opposite effect. Broadcasters began rebuilding the evening through guest accounts, while newspapers focused on the moment the music stopped. Public anger moved quickly. Some condemned Meghan for placing adult resentment on a child. Others argued that the royal hierarchy had created the fear she exploited. Royal hierarchy means the order of rank and duty inside the monarchy. Yet the debate never fully shifted away from Charlotte. Her tears had made every political argument feel smaller. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered beside the gates carrying handmade signs that read, "Charlotte Matters." One young girl placed a paper crown beneath the railings, then reached for her mother's hand and walked away. The gesture spread across social media because it captured what speeches could not. People saw a child who needed protection, not a symbol to be debated. A national broadcaster opened its evening report with William's decision to halt the reception. The presenter called it, "The moment a future king chose fatherhood before ceremony." The words carried force, because the prince had stopped an official event rather than asking Charlotte to endure it for appearances. Meghan watched the coverage from a private residence and felt every explanation turning against her. Each attempt to defend her intention sounded like another refusal to face the injury itself. Harry then informed the palace through a direct call that she had written an apology. William rejected the first version. It contained several paragraphs criticizing royal rank and explaining why Meghan believed the conversation had been necessary. The prince demanded a message addressed only to Charlotte, with no politics, no defense, and no attempt to shift blame. Charles later departed from his prepared remarks at a scheduled engagement. The king stated publicly that no child in his family should ever feel secondary in affection, dignity, or belonging. That evening, a revised handwritten apology reached Charlotte. The public had delivered its judgment, but the final verdict now belonged to the young princess whose tears had stopped the palace. Charlotte read Meghan's second apology beside her parents. This version contained no defense, no criticism of the monarchy, and no attempt to redirect responsibility. It acknowledged that the words spoken at Windsor and repeated at the reception had been wrong. The young princess folded the letter, placed it on the table, and told William she accepted the apology, but did not want to meet Meghan again until she felt ready. In that quiet decision, the crisis finally reached its emotional conclusion. William allowed his daughter to control what happened next. He and Catherine did not ask Charlotte to forgive quickly, protect the family's image, or attend another reconciliation meeting. Reconciliation means rebuilding trust after serious conflict, but both parents understood that trust could not be forced. The princess assured her daughter that accepting an apology did not mean surrendering her boundaries. Meghan accepted the decision and left with Harry without returning to the palace. Her access restrictions remained in place, meaning she could not enter private royal spaces or attend family events without permission. Harry understood that no future contact with the children would happen unless William and Catherine approved it. Meghan offered no further argument, and he did not ask the family to reconsider. Charlotte later spoke privately with George. She told her brother that she no longer believed his future erased her own. George admitted that he had carried guilt since the reception, fearing that becoming king would make his sister feel less important. He promised that his role would never make his voice more valuable inside their family. Charlotte believed him. William then admitted something difficult to Catherine. Halting the reception had been instinctive. Listening afterward had required more strength. The prince had wanted to fight everyone responsible, but his wife reminded him that Charlotte needed to be heard more than she needed another battle fought in her name. Charles returned the bracelet found near the reception room. The king fastened it around his granddaughter's wrist and told her that duty should never require silence when someone crossed a personal boundary. The monarch's words carried no ceremony. They carried regret. The suspended advisor was permanently removed from royal service after a documented communication review confirmed repeated leaks and attempts to manipulate family encounters. The final report closed the institutional part of the crisis, but the deeper verdict was emotional. Meghan's remark had not destroyed the monarchy. It had destroyed the belief that public unity mattered more than a child's safety. William's decision became more than the cancellation of a reception. It proved that Charlotte was not a supporting figure in someone else's story. She was a daughter, a princess, and a person whose dignity mattered more than ceremony. The palace resumed its duties. Harry and Meghan departed. Charlotte returned to her family with her confidence restored. The music eventually returned to the palace, but never again at the cost of Charlotte's voice. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.